Today on Primetime Local News is the first of a three-part segment talking about agricultural-related topics with local federal candidates. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with three candidates from the Lakeland riding. First, we have Desiree Bissonette, who is with the NDP party. Second, we have John Turvey, who is with the Liberal Party. Lastly, we have Fred Surratt, who is with the Maverick Party. So the first of three questions will talk about exports. So over the past year, most industries in Canada saw a sharp decrease in exports. The agricultural industry, on the other hand, in both Canada and Alberta, saw a sharp rise in exports. My question is, what will you and your party do to ensure that the agricultural industry still plays a really key role in post-pandemic economic growth?
So there's lots of different things that within our kind of policy and our ideas that we want to take on. The biggest thing that we're really focused on is just having that food security and having that sustainability long-term with that growth and for those exports. And like we're really focused on making sure that food security is something that is consistent in Canada. And that's something that for myself as well as an individual and as a candidate that I really want to focus on is that agricultural growth, that continued sustainability going forward. And then, just having it so that we have a pan-Canadian food strategy so we can continue working on that.
Well, first we should look at the reasons for that increase, and they'll arise from two factors. And that will determine how we proceed. The first factor is the nature of demand in general for food products. In a sense, we don't eat a lot more as we become more wealthy, and we don't have an option of eating much less as we become poor. So the demand actually stays the same. Global output supplies were stressed due to climate change and supply bottlenecks. And and the transportation challenges associated with COVID. So that actually should inform our approach. Global trade policy works best in a world without tariffs. And based on the economic concepts, Ricardian concepts, comparative advantage, it's not entirely a given, though, that a trade will continue that way. Now, how do we sustain this trade? We need to keep breaking down trade barriers and liberalize trade as much as we can.
I think that it'll be market driven by supply and demand. So a lot of that's beyond our control. But the Maverick platform would be that all the pieces are there in producers and bankers, investors. And if you just create a climate where it's stable, they'll do their work and will provide a healthy marketplace for our grain. It really is outstanding in the last few years what's happened to the grain industry.
The second question for the candidates is regarding business risk management services. There are a variety of business risk management services that are ran by the federal government. Most well known for this year might be agri-recovery or agri-stability. My question for these candidates is, what will you and your party do to ensure that the agricultural industry still has support through these business risk management services?
Yeah, so when I was chatting, kind of looking for an answer to this very specifically. From what I've gathered, there's nothing that is specific about the market strategy. But as a party, we are dedicated to listening to farmers and to finding where they want to take that lead and going with, what's most beneficial for farmers and for their families so that they can continue to have that, their livelihoods supported. And so that we're not making decisions for farmers. The farmers are giving us the direction to go, and then we're following and helping them with what their needs are, rather than just deciding it for them or kind of just going with whatever we're deciding as a party as a whole. We really want to bring in farmers into that conversation, and that's something that I am especially passionate about. When you're from the prairies, farms are integral to our well-being for our communities. And so that's something that is really important to me, is just listening to the guidance of farmers and then following what they need.
Our risk management resources will get overwhelmed in time, and we will have to narrow the focus of those if they are scarce resources and direct them to farms that will tend to serve local rather than the export market. So the forces that are at work and risk mitigation actually favor domestic production, because as we move forward, we will face greater food insecurity, and we will only be willing to promote ensuring the food that we have to eat rather than the welfare of exporters. So that's something that the agri-food industry would have to bear in mind. The agri-recovery is not designed to cover recurrent cyclical risk, and that is what climate change is bringing us. That is what makes it unsustainable.
We're supportive of those kinds of initiatives for sure, Jillian. And there's always work to do, but it's been long overdue that our governments have understood that agriculture is a big business, has a lot of ebbs and flows, is subject to weather, needs those supports in the background for sure. So we're very supportive of those in principle, and there's always issues. One of the issues is time. For example, our own crop was decimated by drought, and we chose to put it up for feed. There's always that challenge of how do you get recompensed for insurance for what's there. But those are all issues, and we're supportive of that as a party.
My last question for the candidates is, what do you believe is the most pressing issue in the agriculture and agri-food sector? And what do you and your party propose as a solution to fix this issue?
I think the biggest thing that is going to be an issue, especially in the next 10, 15 years, is the climate crisis. And we're already starting to see effects from it with the drought, and we're seeing all of these different things happening with fires, and we're seeing, resources being depleted. And that's only going to continue on as we're going. With the climate crisis, we're going to be seeing increase in temperature. We already have problems with soil health in general. And so we really need to create a sustainable infrastructure and a plan to combat that. Something that I've been learning a lot about lately is regenerative farming and sustainable grazing and things like that, as well as just kind of the broader ideas on ways that you can optimize farms for long-term sustainability to protect them from the climate crisis that is going to be coming. Some other things that I think are really important is when you live out in rural, there are so many amazing farms and so many amazing community staples where people have, food that could be localized. And I think optimizing our food systems locally and investing in farmers market, investing in helping farms transition to regenerative agriculture, and then making sure that they're protected through the climate crisis is going to be something that we really have to focus on. And that's another one of those things where we would have farmers taking the lead.
There are a number of issues that are of great concern. There's climate change, supply chain issues, tariff, non-tariff barriers, all present obstacles. But one of the main things we have is that the Canadian agri-food industry in general is by necessity dependent on a finite and depreciating resource, land itself. This means that of all our concerns, the focus should be on preserving arable land as the cornerstone of Canadian agricultural output.
The biggest problem we have is in the Maverick is that the Central Canada agendas keep overshadowing our Western interests. So what happens is that while we may have an interest to develop something in the beef industry, that often that's bargained away for an interest that the larger Canada has. And that goes on and on. For example, there might be an interest in steel and the bargaining of around the areas of steel, and that are more lucrative to Central Canada. And the issues of packing plants and that just get pushed to the back. And so Maverick has a clear mandate to make what's in the best interest of the West. We support that.
I'd like to thank the candidates for taking the time to speak with me about this. Interviews from the remaining candidates for the Lakeland riding will run next week. Interviews with candidates from the Battleford Lloydminster riding will also run next week in preparation for the election, September 20th.